So the first question is how old is the pyramid at Giza? Obviously, the history books say it's anything from 2550 BC to 3200 BC. There's a lot of problems with dating it because we're trying to basically, our main way of dating something like this is with carbon dating. Problem is, actually inside the pyramid there is no carbon.
What? No mummies?
There's no mummies. In actually the main Giza, there is no, we have what we think is a sarcophagus, but there has actually never been, there's no dead, there's no mummies, there's no, it's as supposedly as a burial chamber. Somebody has robbed it a long time ago. The evidence we have that we have carbon dated is from 23 years of activity, a lot of activity in and around the pyramids, but actually nothing within the pyramid. So we know around these dates, for 23 years or so, there was a lot of people working in and around the pyramids. We don't actually know anything else for certain.
There's an interesting alignment with star constellation, isn't there? Is it the three stars on Orion's belt in Sirius? Yeah, and that happens at around about the last ice age.
There's also a period where it lines up with Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter. The planets line up pretty much dead over the top of it. That happens every 2,300 years or so.
Okay. I do think the way the pyramids at Giza are arranged on the land is basically an interpretation of the three stars on Orion's belt, though. And then the pyramid exactly aligns with that at 10,000 BC. And then it aligns with it again before that every 26,000 years, roughly, with the precession of the equinox cycle. So if it's not 12,000 years old, it's a further 26 on top of 12. So it's 38,000 years old was when it was built to align with that star constellation.
And also, I mean, Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock talk a lot about weather erosion, the flooding events and things. I mean, particularly Randall Carlson points at the Sphinx, and we see what looks like weathering from water.
From the rains.
They believe the Northern Sahara was lush and green, but that was like 12,000 years ago. We then look at something like the Younger Dryas event, again, 12,000 years ago, which we believe was a large comet hit the northern ice shelf at the end of the last ice age, caused a load of water and rainfall worldwide and mass flooding worldwide. Is probably where we get the stories of Noah's Ark and the great floods that ended the world from. That again, this happened though 12,000 years ago, in which case the Sphinx and the pyramid are at least 12,000 years old.
I think the Egyptians just came along and found what was already there.
Yeah, a lot of people
some empty pyramids and started a civilization there again. That's what I truly believe.
To be honest, I think the evidence fits just as easily for that the Egyptians turned up, spent 23 years renovating the place.
Yes.
As does the evidence that they built it in a 23-year period. They would have had to have laid, is it something like 800 stones a day for it to be completed within a 23-year period.
Well, there's 2.5 million blocks, aren't there? I know that much.
2.3 million blocks, yeah. They average at around 2.5 tons, but some of them are 80 tons in weight. A lot of the stone they brought in from anything up to 500 miles away. But I mean, the big question is then, if we're going to talk about aliens or potentially somebody else influencing the construction of this, we have to ask the question then, could the Egyptians have built this?
Some people also think it's possible with sound waves as well, to be able to levitate large blocks and to move them that way as well.
Yeah. A lot of that evidence seems to come from that coral castle, though, and that chap who said he could do it, but I don't think there's any actual... I've never seen any genuine evidence.
There's a South African guy, Michael Tellinger, isn't there, that keeps talking about the conical structures that he's finding, fossils of these... like these ice cream cones that he reckons that they used as like directional tools to direct the sound in order to use sound to levitate the blocks. He's got some quite interesting stuff out, Michael Tellinger. He's the one that talks about the Damu us being seeded as a slave race by the Anunnaki 250, 300,000 years ago to mine the gold for them, and it all started off supposedly Adam's calendar in South Africa. So I'm quite intrigued by his work.
He talks about those rock formations as well, doesn't he? The archaeologists say are cattle herding, like they're like fences basically, but they're made out of stone, and there's thousands of them all the way across South Africa. But there's no gate. They're big circles and semicircles and close to each other. They said, well, how do you get the cows in? What do they do? Jump over the wall? It's like 8 foot tall.
Yeah, they're not cattle pens, are they?
This seems to have been built with a purpose. Why did they build it with several different materials if it was just a burial ground for Khufu? Why is it so complicated?
Because it wasn't a burial ground. It wasn't a tomb. It wasn't.
No, it wasn't. No,
it had a function. It relates to piezoelectricity, quartz, flowing water.
There are certain things within the structure that would suggest that there was something else there before that's now been removed. In the Grand Gallery, it goes up at about 50 degrees slope. Either side of it, there's grooves. So it's not just a square, it actually comes down, then it comes in, and there's grooves. At every 6 to 8 feet, there are little notches put into the stone as well. It seems that there would have been something wooden or something constructed within the Grand Gallery that is now no longer there. One of the theories is that this could have been part of the electrical generating apparatus that's long since gone. One device is called a Lord Kelvin thunderstorm device, and it's literally just uses flowing water to generate electricity. It doesn't generate a lot, but it generates some. Damon, you mentioned the piezoelectricity. The white limestone they would have had on the outside, which would have looked stunning, is also a really, really good insulator. The gold cap on the top is a great electrical conductor. The rough limestone in the middle was much higher in silica and other crystals, which, if you know it's about piezoelectricity, it's about basically you squeeze or push onto these crystals and you generate energy. And then you've got these obelisks that were in and around. The granite chambers they talk about in the middle that we think of sarcophagus would have been hermetically sealed, they believe. They were so perfectly built and so perfectly tooled that we're talking about error of microns, that the lid would have sat perfectly and would have sealed whatever was inside it. There is some evidence that it may have held acidic materials at some point from evidence on the inside. So then we look at something like a Baghdad battery.
I was just
and we
thinking
have to wonder, were these granite suits actually batteries at some point? Were the obelisks around them antenna to transmit the electricity wirelessly? Were there other batteries in and around the sites, like the 90-ton granite sarcophagus that were found at Saqqara, that officially were sarcophagi for bulls?
Yeah, but I was just thinking as well, you're saying the conductor at the top, maybe it's a way of harnessing the energy from lightning and transferring it through the pyramid into the sarcophaguses to store the energy as like batteries for later use.
Very possibly. Yeah. And the pyramids get struck by lightning a lot. But they are the tallest thing for, they're actually the tallest object built by mankind for like 3,000 years at least, depending on when you believe they were built. So in that case, we start thinking about it. Could the Egyptians have built the pyramids? I don't think they did.
No, I think it's very unlikely.
I think they used them. I think they probably worshipped them. You come across something like that as an ancient man that you've only ever seen a mud hut before, and you come and you find that thing.
Yeah.
Right. If we had an asteroid impact today and it wiped out pretty much all of civilization, most of life, and the human species was annihilated, within 10,000 years, everything that we've done would be gone. The only things that would be left would be some of these ancient megalithic monuments, like the pyramids of Giza. They would outlast anything we've done in any city.
Yeah. And I think that was the point of the construction, wasn't it? If you were talking about some sort of could aliens have built this thing, well, you'd have to say, well, why would they? It would be far below their technological ability to build a massive stone pyramid. Why would they bother? The one reason they might bother is because they wanted it to last. You know, if you wanted something to last 20,000 years, you don't build it out of steel, because steel rusts and breaks, and glass breaks. And if you want to build something to last a long time, build it out of stone.
Yeah.
One of the things about the pyramids that is hard to sort of get your head around that it was an accident is the location. So the one point is that it's the pyramids are built almost exactly in the center of what would be the landmass. So when we did when the British decided we were going to do the maps, and we decided where the Greenwich Meridian was, we decided to put the Greenwich Meridian through, like I say, through Britain, because we're massive egomaniacs and we decided to be the center of the earth. But actually, when they were discussing it, and educated people were discussing it, they all said it should be through Giza, because that is actually the central point of the landmass. If you draw it on a two-dimensional map, you know, like from Alaska, Russia, put a thing through the middle, it's Giza. You've also then got, I mean, there's no way the Egyptians knew that. You've also got this weird thing about its latitude, which I'm going to say with a little bit of salt over my shoulder, because it's not 100% true. But some people have argued that the latitude of Giza is 29.979245 degrees north. The speed of light is 299,792,458 meters per second. Just in case you want to rewind that and check, those numbers are the same. It's only roughly correct though, because that latitude doesn't actually exactly go through the middle of the pyramid. It does cut through the pyramid, but it doesn't cut through exactly the center.
You could build it. You could build it more accurate, could you?
There you go. It's rough. But also, you got to remember, land masses move. So in 10,000 years, it might have been exactly 10,000 years ago.
There you go.
Is that just a coincidence?
Probably not.
Could that possibly be a coincidence?
Not when there's other numbers encoded, like pi, the Fibonacci sequence, and other mathematical series within the pyramids. They had a keen understanding of mathematics. They understood Pythagoras' theorem. They understood. There's so much encoded within the architecture of the pyramids. That they were mathematical masters. They were engineering masters. Whoever designed them.
This is why Nikola Tesla became obsessed with the pyramid, and he believed it was a power station, basically. He was trying to figure out a way to draw in and wirelessly transmit energy from the ionosphere, and he basically designed a modern day version of the pyramid in his mind. Whether that will have worked or not, we'll never know.
Probably did. The American government took his research
and tore his towers down straight away as well. The thing is with the pyramid as well, we're still unlocking secrets. Researchers recently found that the pyramid actually focuses and generates electromagnetic energy, and it focuses electromagnetic energy towards the base, around the area where the underground chamber is. When they discovered this and they started to map it and trying to figure out how or why it does that, it started to unlock things like they're doing new or trying to create new light sensors. They're using it to create new modern solar cells. This temple, this pyramid is still influencing modern technology today.
Yeah. There was a water chamber, wasn't there, found?
There are water chambers that flow underneath. The Nile would have been much closer to it a couple of thousand years ago. And it did have water flow in it. That's part of the piezoelectric system. It requires running water to flow underneath. And there are several chambers which would have flowed water. There's a lot of theories that water possibly flowed through the pyramid itself. One theory is that it was actually basically a massive pumping station to pump water. Which actually I quite like that theory, but there are loads of theories about what this machine could have been. But one of the important things is we're still missing big parts of it, because we know there's at least 2 chambers that we've never uncovered, and they're going to, in some point in the next year or two, they're going to try to break into one of these chambers. But unfortunately, to get into the one very large chamber that they believe is just above the king's chamber is going to require digging basically, and they're a little bit hesitant to actually start drilling holes, even though they've used dynamite previously to go in and look at these things. They're a little hesitant to think. I believe anything like this, a project of this size, would have been built for a reason, and I think generating electricity would have been a very good reason, even if it was only enough electricity to basically light up 3 or 4 light bulbs. That would have been considered magic 5,000 years ago. I do think that would have been a project that they would have done. And we know from things like the Baghdad battery, there was a knowledge of electricity. You can light up an LED from a lemon. So I purely believe that this is physically possible. But I also believe that it's probably much, much older and not built by the Egyptians. And we also now know from satellite imagery that through northern Africa, hidden under the sand, there are probably hundreds of pyramids and cities that have been lost to the Sahara. There was possibly a vast empire built in North Africa that was lost after the last ice age. Maybe one of the cities was called Atlantis. What do you guys think then? Any alien involvement, or could the Egyptians have done it? That's what I say. Anybody actually believe here that the Egyptians built the pyramids? Anyone? Hands up. No?
Not the dynasties that we're taught of in school. No. It depends what you mean by Egyptian. You got to define, but people
the
that
Egyptian
lived in
empire that existed
that land
from
at some time.
5,000 BC to roughly now.
If we're referring to the Ptolemaic dynasties, then I would say not. But I would say people that were inhabitant in that area at the time. Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that it would have been inhabitants of the area at the time, because at the end of the day they were there.
Well, there's no reason to suggest it was anybody from outside the area or anybody other than who was living there at the time they were constructed.
The Library of Alexandria.
Yeah.
That there was written down that actually the first Egypt settlements were a settlement of Atlantis, so they weren't from the area. They actually were people that had. Well, one story is that it was people that had fled Atlantis after the cataclysm that destroyed the city, and this was one of the first places they settled. Others is that actually the Atlanteans did create settlements all over the world. One was even that's where Stonehenge was built. It wasn't actually built as a clock. It was built as a meeting point. When humanity needs to do something, we're very, very good at finding simple ways as well, not just clever ways of doing it. But I think that's kind of also part of my argument, is that for some of the places we're going to talk about, is then you have to think about the motivation. What was the motivation, or why would have they been so motivated to put so much effort into building something like this?
As they say on Red Dwarf, massive rips, rimmer, massive whips. Is that what it was down to?
One person in charge that thinks it's a good idea, basically.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is mind-boggling to understand the incentive towards wanting to do it. They are amazing beyond a shadow of a doubt. Yeah.
Well, you only have to
that's why it just has to have a function, doesn't it? There has to be some kind of function to it. You don't build something with 2.5 million blocks weighing 40 to 80 tons for fun.
Do you know what I find? Sorry, Damien. You know what I find interesting? The Victorian follies.
I was just going to say that.
The follies, absolutely no purpose whatsoever other than to look good and show importance. Yeah, your average guy will build half a castle on the side of his house. Is it because he's a complete and utter T1, TW4T? Possibly, is it because he wants to make himself look important?
Keeping up with the Joneses, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It's the keeping up with the Joneses.
Look how wealthy I am. But that's what I'm saying about how resources, when you're talking about resources, these early Victorians had vast resources and wealth, and it was almost sort of like, look how wealthy I am.
Right then, so that suggests then it must have had vast resources and wealth in that region when they built the pyramid, which seems to be far more likely when it was lush green than when it's been desertified by the Sahara Desert, which then puts the construction back more in line with 12,000 years ago,
10,000,
at the
12,000.
least.
I'm not suggesting that this is the reasoning for all of them, but I'm fairly sure that the importance of, it's a powerful civilization, or we'll show our neighbours, or this king or pharaoh or whatever is more powerful than them. Yeah, and it also bearing in mind that pharaohs weren't looked at as being kings, or they were looked at as being gods. They were viewed as gods. They were gods on earth. They were far removed from a king or anything. They were far more important. They were a god. They were a living god on earth.
Yeah.
So
trying to deify themselves through there
because they were actually
good terminology to deify themselves.
Mm. Mm-hmm. I was wondering. I do believe in that they. My favorite TV show ever, Stargate SG-1, and these, they were all gods, and it's because they're actually aliens that knew more about us, and we mistook them for gods. That's a theory that for me has logic. I don't necessarily think it's true, but there is a logic to that.
I understand that. Yeah.
Anybody with more advanced technology.
Don't know. Go back and view some of the ancient scriptures and their supposed visitations of God, and then replace God with the word extraterrestrial, and they seem a lot more logical.
Yeah. I've had this argument
on Mount Sinai,
recently.
10 Commandments descended in from the heavens in smoke, and then gave him 10 rules to how to live, how to be civilized. That doesn't sound like an alien race coming down and giving you their instructions on how to be better.
You could argue that most gods, if not all gods, are extraterrestrial just by default, because they're not actually inhabitant sentient beings that walk the planet per se. So they're all omnipotent, all-encompassing, all over the universe, everywhere at any one time, ever, depending upon which religion or which cult. So technically speaking, even gods are extraterrestrial by the very nature and description, and the fact that they're deities.
I had a discussion with somebody recently that said the orbs and things that are seen aren't UFOs, they're demons, and UFOs are demons. So seriously, what's more logical? Supernatural demons coming from God and heaven, or aliens? It can't be aliens, because how can they travel those vast distances? Because seriously, you're saying that it's more logical that they're demons. It's more logical that it's nonsense and it's not a thing, and we're looking at weather balloons than it is logical that they're demons.